My husband cheated with my best friend while I paid for his medications. Then I took the cruelest revenge. My stomach always does this stupid slow flip whenever life decides to hit reset on me. And that night, it felt like it was trying to crawl out through my throat while I sat at the tiny kitchen table staring at an email from the hospital with numbers I did not even want to read properly. I had my elbows on the table, one hand in my hair, the other still holding a pen over a half-finished grocery list, and my husband was in the bedroom down the hall coughing again in that way that sounded like it came from somewhere way too deep. The ceiling light was buzzing like it was annoyed with me. The sink was full of dishes, and my phone kept lighting up with reminders I had snoozed 3 times already. I remember thinking, really clearly, that I would give anything for my biggest problem to be something dumb like a late credit card payment, not whatever this email was about to make real. My name is Kendra, by the way, and I am a nurse, which is funny if you think about it, because I spend all day taking care of other people, and then come home terrified that I am somehow failing the one person I promised to take care of forever. We live in a small apartment in a pretty average city in the United States. Nothing fancy, just the kind of place where you know the sound of your neighbor's car and you can hear people arguing through the walls if they get loud enough. My husband and I got married young, straight out of school, thinking love and hard work were going to be enough to keep us afloat. Then his lungs decided to betray him in his mid-20s and everything changed. The diagnosis came after months of weird symptoms that we both tried to pretend were allergies or a stubborn cold. He would get winded walking up the stairs. Then he started waking up in the middle of the night coughing so hard that he would grip the bedsheets like he was bracing for impact. I pushed him to see a specialist, because that is what I do at work all the time. I nag people into taking care of themselves. When the specialist ordered tests and then called us back into the office with that serious face that doctors get when they are about to say something you really do not want to hear, my stomach did that same flip. The words came out in pieces. Rare lung disease, progressive, treatment options, costs. We had a short-term health plan, the kind you get when you are in between real coverage and you tell yourself it is better than nothing. I was working per diem at a small clinic that did not offer benefits, so we had to buy our own coverage, and short-term was all we could afford at the time. It was apparently only better than nothing if you never got actually sick. The plan did not cover pre-existing conditions, which is a nice corporate way of saying, hey, if you already have this thing, we are not touching it. The treatments the specialist recommended were the kind that come with price tags so high they do not even feel like real numbers. Even with our parents helping where they could, the bills started stacking up like some horrible paper tower in the corner of my mind. I opened the email because avoiding it was not going to make the charges go away. The new statement was worse than I expected. I sat there doing the math in my head, which is never as good as when I actually write it down, but I could already feel the panic creeping up. My paycheck as a nurse covered our rent and the basics, but this was something else. This was several lifetimes of overtime. I heard my husband cough again and mutter something under his breath, probably apologizing for waking me even though I was not asleep. He was 24 and already walking like every breath was a negotiation. I did what I always do when my brain starts spiraling. I opened my laptop and started searching. Better jobs, higher pay, different states, travel contracts. I found a temporary nursing contract in another state that paid almost double what I was making, plus benefits that looked like an actual grown-up plan. It felt insane even to consider leaving him, even for a few months. But the alternative was watching him get sicker while we drowned in debt. I remember calling my mother and my father and laying it all out, my voice too fast, my words tripping over each other. They listened, asked a million practical questions, and then my father did that long exhale he always does before he agrees to something big. If this contract really pays that much and gives decent coverage, he said, then maybe this is exactly what you have to do right now. You are not abandoning him. You are trying to keep him alive. My mother agreed, which shocked me more, because she is the emotional one, the one who cries at commercials, but she was strangely steady that night. She said she and my father would help however they could, and then she suggested something I had been avoiding even thinking about. Talk to your friend, she said. You know she would drop everything to help. She practically lived here when you were in high school. She loves him like family. My best friend had been part of my life since we were teenagers. She had been at our wedding, obviously, front row, crying louder than my mother, which we still teased her about. She was in school still, trying to finish her degree, but she lived in the same city as us and had been around a lot since my husband got sick. She was the one who sat with him in the hospital when I had to go to work, the one who organized his medication schedule on a color-coded chart like she was doing a school project. It felt natural to lean on her, even though part of me hated that I needed to. When I called her and explained the contract, there was this pause on the line, just long enough for me to think she was going to tell me I was out of my mind. Instead, she said, "You should absolutely take it. I can handle things here. Honestly, I want to help. I hate feeling useless watching him struggle like this." She sounded so sincere that I felt guilty even for that tiny flash of relief. She offered to stay at our place as much as needed, said her parents would understand that she was helping family. She offered to manage his appointments, keep track of every pill, make sure he ate when he was supposed to. I know how ridiculous this is going to sound in hindsight, but at the time it felt like some blessed solution, like the universe was actually giving us a door instead of just brick walls. I talked it through with my husband. He tried to argue at first, saying he did not want me to uproot my life, that something would work out. Then we went over the bills together, and reality did what reality always does. He admitted that the extra money and real health coverage could change everything. He said he trusted my best friend completely. He did this little joke about how between the two of us, he would be bossed around into staying alive even if he tried not to. We spent the next few weeks in this weird blur of planning and emotions. I interviewed for the contract, signed papers, filled out forms for the new health plan that would cover spouses. I added him as a dependent and tried not to cry in the human resources office when the woman congratulated me on making a smart choice for my family. I started making lists of everything my best friend would need to know, even though she already knew most of it. I organized pills into little boxes labeled by day and time, not because she could not do it, but because I needed to feel like I was still in control of something. The night before I left, we sat on the couch and pretended to watch some show while actually just staring at the screen and thinking about everything else. My best friend had already moved some of her things into the guest room. My parents had dropped off food and blankets and 100 pieces of advice. I curled up next to my husband, listening to his breathing, feeling every uneven rise and fall like my own chest was doing it. "We are going to get through this," I said, like one of the nurses I work with reassuring a patient, except this was my life and not a shift. He kissed my forehead and said, "Go save our lives, okay?" If I had known what they were going to do while I was gone, I do not know if I would have stayed or if I would have burned the whole place down before I left. At the time, I just hugged them both and told myself that this was what love looked like when you are an adult. It looked like leaving the person you love with someone you trusted so you could go earn enough money to keep him alive. The new job felt like stepping into another version of myself. New city, new apartment with mismatched furniture, new hospital with its own smells and routines and gossip. I worked long shifts, sometimes doubles when they begged, because the pay was good and the overtime was better. The employer plan was solid. I filled out the forms to add him as a dependent and practically cried when the card came in the mail with both our names on it. I kept it in my wallet like a talisman. Every 2 weeks when my paycheck hit, I sat down and split it automatically. Half went into our joint account back home, the one we had always used to pay rent and bills. Half stayed with me so I could cover my rent, food, and whatever random expenses came up. I watched the hospital bills get paid from that joint account. I watched the numbers move. It hurt every time, but it was also this constant reminder that I was doing something, that leaving had not just been some selfish impulse. My best friend sent updates constantly at first, photos of him on the couch with his oxygen, smiling in that tired way he did, short videos of their ridiculous jokes, little messages about how he was tolerating a new medication or how the specialist appointment went. It kept me sane. It made the nights alone in my new place feel less like abandonment and more like teamwork. Over time, the messages got a little less frequent, but that made sense. People get busy. She was balancing his care and her classes. I was working every shift they would give me. When she did text, it was often late at night, saying she was exhausted but okay, that he had had a rough day, that she was worrying about him more. She started complaining that she might have to pause school for a semester because the schedule was impossible. I told her I would pay for whatever she needed, like that was a normal thing to say to your friend who was caring for your sick husband. Around the same time, my husband started asking for the money earlier every month. He would call or text and say that there had been some surprise bill, some urgent test, something that could not wait until the weekend. A scan got rescheduled. A new medication was being tried. The hospital wanted payment before scheduling another procedure. It always sounded urgent, and every time he asked, I wired the money sooner. I stopped even thinking of it as my salary. It was just hospital money. I kept every receipt in a folder, just because that is what nurses do. We document. We talked on the phone constantly, at least at first. Late night calls when I came off a shift to hear his voice. Morning calls on my days off while he had coffee and I tried to pretend motel-style curtains were the same as the curtains back home. He always sounded tired but grateful. He called me his hero more than once. It kept me going. There were tiny things I can see now that did not fit. The way my best friend sometimes answered the phone from our bedroom instead of the living room and then laughed it off. The way my husband mentioned inside jokes they had about some show they were watching together and then brushed past it when I asked questions. The way she started calling him our patient in a weird, half-joking way and then corrected herself too fast. At the time, I filed all of that under stress and intimacy that comes from caregiving. When you are sick and someone is bathing you and giving you pills and helping you to the bathroom, boundaries blur. I know that. I have seen it. The contract was supposed to be for 1 year. But after several months, I realized I had enough saved to take a short break and go home for a surprise visit without destroying everything I had built. I wanted to see him in person, to be in my own apartment, to smell our stupid old couch, to hug my parents without a screen between us. I did not tell him I was coming because I thought it would be cute and romantic. Yes, I know. I booked the ticket, arranged my shifts to give myself a stretch of days off, and told my manager I was going home for a family visit. I texted my parents that I was coming, but begged them not to say anything to my husband or my friend. I wanted that movie-style reunion moment where I would walk in and he would be shocked and we would cry and everything would feel less like a survival drill and more like an actual marriage again. The flight back felt longer than it actually was. I spent most of it picturing his face when he saw me, picturing us curled up in our bed breathing the same air again. When the plane landed, my hands were shaking. I took a cab straight to our building, heart hammering in my chest, clutching my overnight bag like a shield. I still had my keys. I had this dumb, romantic idea of opening the door quietly and walking in like some cheesy surprise video online. I put my key in the lock and turned it slowly. The door opened easily. The living room looked the same at first glance, blankets on the couch, prescription bottles on the coffee table. I stepped in, closed the door behind me as quietly as I could, dropped my bag by the wall, and headed toward the hallway. I heard the low sound of a television from the bedroom and something that sounded like laughter. When I pushed the bedroom door open, nothing in my body was ready for what I saw, even though if you told me this story about someone else, I would probably say, "Of course, what did you expect?" He was propped up against the pillows, shirtless, his oxygen tubing looped around his ears. She was next to him under the covers, also clearly not dressed. Their clothes were scattered on the chair where I usually put my pajamas. They were wrapped around each other in this familiar way that made my skin crawl. For a second, none of them noticed me, because they were looking at each other like they were the only two people in the world. Then my best friend turned her head, saw me standing there in the doorway with my hair still messy from travel and my eyes wide. And everything froze. I do not remember dropping my purse, but I must have, because later it was on the floor. I just remember this sound coming out of me that did not feel like my voice, more like some animal sound. "What the hell is this?" I said. I think I shouted. But in my memory, it sounds weirdly calm, like the calm right before a storm that takes your roof off. My husband's eyes got huge. He tried to sit up more, started coughing, grabbed for the blanket. My best friend scrambled, pulling the sheet up to her chest like that was going to make this less horrible. For a second, nobody spoke, which is crazy, because there were a million things to say. I stepped fully into the room and slammed my hand against the light switch, flooding everything with brightness. No more shadows. No more pretending this could be misunderstood. My best friend was the first one to actually form words. "Kendra, listen," she said, and her voice had this begging tone that made me want to throw something. "I was going to tell you, I swear. We were just trying to figure out the right way to..." "The right way to what?" I cut in. "To screw my husband in my bed while I am out of state working doubles to pay his hospital bills?" He tried to talk then, wheezing and coughing between syllables. "It is not what it looks like," he started, which is still the dumbest thing anyone has ever said to me, considering it was exactly what it looked like. She put a hand on his arm like she was shielding him from me, and then looked straight at me with this strange mix of guilt and defiance. "I am pregnant," she said, and for some reason the room went even quieter, like sound itself decided it was too awkward to stick around. I stared at her. I waited for her to say she was joking, waiting for someone to appear with a camera and yell surprise, because surely I had not just flown home early to find out that my best friend was pregnant by my sick husband in my own bed while my money paid for everything. But she kept talking. "We did not plan this," she said. "It just happened. We have been spending so much time together, and we realize that what we feel is different. We love each other, really love each other, and with everything he is going through, he deserves to be happy." I laughed. I actually laughed, this harsh, broken sound that hurt my throat. He deserves to be happy, I repeated. Does he also deserve for me to keep wiring my paycheck like his personal sponsor while you two play family in my house? My husband tried to swing his legs over the side of the bed like he was going to get up and come to me, but he was breathing too hard. He looked pale, the blue shadows under his eyes even darker than before. Part of my brain, the nurse part, registered that his oxygen level was probably dropping. The rest of my brain did not care. We were going to talk to you, he said between coughs. We were going to figure out how to do this in a way that would not hurt you so much. You are doing great so far, I said. I could feel my hands shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Let me guess. You were hoping I would just keep sending money, because I am so compassionate and so responsible and so scared of you dying that I would never pull the plug on your little arrangement. You are overreacting, my best friend snapped then, and that was the moment something in me snapped too. Nobody is trying to use you. You wanted to help him. You love him. We all love him. Think about what is best for him, not your pride. The room tilted. My pride, I said slowly. My pride. I left my home, my job, my life to go work somewhere else so I could get him an actual health plan. I send half my paycheck to this account every month. I trusted you to look after him, and you decided that included sleeping with him and getting pregnant. And you want to talk to me about pride? She opened her mouth like she was going to argue, then closed it again. My husband started crying, silent tears sliding down his cheeks. He reached out a hand toward me and said my name like it was a prayer. No, I said. Do not say my name. My voice sounded flat even to me. Something in me went very still. You two deserve each other, and you deserve every single consequence that is coming. I do not remember leaving the bedroom. 1 second I was in there. The next I was in the living room grabbing my bag and my keys with hands that did not feel like they belonged to me. I heard him calling my name, coughing. I heard her saying something about stress being bad for his condition, that I needed to calm down or I would kill him. That last part actually made me laugh again. Apparently everything was my fault now, including the air in his lungs. I walked out, slammed the door behind me so hard a picture frame fell off the wall. I went down the stairs as fast as I could, half expecting one of them to chase me, but nobody did. My car was right where I had left it months before, looking dusty and familiar. I got in, hands shaking on the steering wheel, and just sat there for a minute staring at the building like maybe the last 10 minutes had been a hallucination. Then my phone buzzed. Messages started pouring in. Him, her, both of them. Variations of calm down and you are overreacting and you cannot leave like this and think about his health and we need to talk like adults. One of them actually wrote that I was being selfish. I turned the phone off, started the engine, and drove to my parents' house on autopilot, blinking back tears so hard my vision blurred more than once. I almost missed a red light because I could not stop replaying that bedroom scene in my head. When I pulled into my parents' driveway, my mother was already at the door, like she had felt something. I barely made it inside before I started sobbing. I told them everything, every detail, every word, the pregnancy, the speeches about love, the demand that I keep paying. My father's face went from worried to furious in about 5 seconds. My mother kept saying, "No, no, no," like if she said it enough times it would undo reality. They did not tell me to calm down. They did not tell me to forgive. My mother went straight to the kitchen to make tea because that is what she does when the world falls apart. And my father pulled out his old notebook where he writes every important phone number and said, "We are going to talk to a lawyer." He said it like some people say, "We are going to church," like it was the only logical step after faith breaks. I slept in my old room that night, in a bed that felt smaller than I remembered. My phone kept buzzing on the nightstand, lighting up with calls and messages that I ignored. I woke up in the morning with a headache and that horrible second of forgetting where you are before the memories crash back in. My father gave me coffee and then drove me to a law office he had looked up early that morning. The lawyer was calm in that professional way, took notes while I explained, asked questions about our finances, about the health plan, about the joint account. When I told him about walking in on them, about the pregnancy, about the messages telling me I still needed to pay because he was sick, the lawyer's expression did not change much, but his pen moved faster. "In this state," he said, "there is a waiting period for divorce. Roughly a couple of months. We can file now and start the process. The main things we need to do are separate your finances immediately and make sure you are not on the hook for any new debts he takes on. The health plan through your new employer complicates things a bit, but not in a way that cannot be handled." He suggested I close the joint account, or at least remove my direct deposits, set up a separate account in my name only, and stop paying anything that was not already clearly my responsibility. He said words like marital assets and liability and equitable division. I nodded like I understood, but honestly all I heard was, "You do not have to keep being their bank." "What about his medical bills?" I asked. "They are in both our names." He said that we would need to go through them one by one, sort out what was owed from before I file and what comes after. He reassured me that I was not automatically responsible for every choice he made just because we are married. I did not fully believe him, but I wanted to. I left his office with a folder full of papers and a list of things to do. Close the joint account. Talk to my employer about the health plan and what happens now that I am back in this state. Stop sending money. Do not sign anything from my husband without the lawyer seeing it first. It felt like marching orders for a war I had not known I would ever fight. When I checked the joint account online from my parents' kitchen table, my heart dropped. There were withdrawals that had nothing to do with hospitals or pharmacies, restaurants, a fancy baby store. Some subscription I did not recognize that sounded suspiciously like it involved baby planning. I scrolled and scrolled, feeling my face get hot. I printed the statements and put them in the lawyer's folder. My lawyer did not even need to threaten him with it. Just knowing those charges could be dragged into daylight was enough. Then I called my manager at the hospital in the other state and told them I needed to end the contract early for family reasons. They were surprisingly understanding. I lost the employer health plan, obviously, but the lawyer said that could actually work in my favor in some ways, because it meant I was no longer providing coverage that they could guilt me into maintaining. The continuation coverage would have cost more than I could afford anyway, and the lawyer said cutting that tie was actually strategic. I stayed with my parents. My mother made too much food. My father watched me like I was going to disappear. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides and forgot to fill them back in. They still thought I had that out-of-state job and that insurance card in my wallet. It did not take long for my in-laws to show up. They knocked on my parents' door one afternoon like they were coming over for coffee. My mother looked through the peephole and sighed before she opened it. They started out soft, of course. My mother-in-law hugged me like she had not raised the man who had just blown up my life. My father-in-law did that sad head tilt people do when they are about to ask you to sacrifice yourself for someone else. They said they were so sorry about what had happened between me and their son, that they did not condone the cheating, but that we had to think about the bigger picture. The bigger picture? I repeated. You mean his health? I know. They nodded eagerly. He is not well, my mother-in-law said, like I had somehow missed that part. Stress is very bad for his condition. This whole situation has made him worse. He loves you, you know. He just made a mistake. A mistake, I said, trying not to laugh again. He has been having an ongoing relationship with my best friend in my house while I send money from another state. She is pregnant. That is not a mistake. That is a second life. They exchanged a glance like I was being unreasonable. Then my father-in-law cleared his throat and said, "We were hoping we could talk about a practical solution. Maybe an arrangement where you legally remain married so he can stay on your health plan, and you agree to a financial support amount each month, in exchange for some concessions on his part." It took me a second to realize what they were suggesting. "You want me to keep him as a dependent and send him money while he plays house with her?" I said slowly. "You want me to be his sponsor, so he can raise a child with the woman he cheated with?" They looked uncomfortable, but did not deny it. My mother-in-law even tried to dress it up with religious language about vows in sickness and in health, about forgiveness, about doing the right thing. Then she went one step further and said the ugliest part out loud. "You could talk to her," she said. "You could suggest that she consider other options. Given his condition, it might be better if she did not go through with the pregnancy. It would simplify everything. Then you two could work on your marriage, and he could focus on getting better without that extra stress." I stared at her like she had grown another head. "You are actually asking me to convince the woman who slept with my husband to end her pregnancy so you can have your clean little story back," I said. "Do you hear yourself?" She flushed. My father-in-law started to say something about protecting their son. I cut him off. "Here is what is going to happen," I said. "I am filing for divorce. I am separating our finances. I am not going to be part of whatever mess they have created together. If you want to support him, support him. If you want to support her, support her. But do not come into my parents' house and ask me to keep killing myself to pay for the man who decided I was expendable." They did that thing where people flip from begging to threatening in about 2 minutes. They talked about how ungrateful I was, how much they had welcomed me into the family. They said everyone would think badly of me if I left a sick man. My father appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, and told them the conversation was over. They left in a cloud of disappointment, promising to pray for me. Around that time, the parents of my former best friend reached out. They had been neighbors with my parents for years. They invited me over for coffee like they had done 100 times when we were kids. I went, mostly because I wanted them to hear it from me instead of some twisted version later. They had no idea what had happened. They thought their daughter was just being extra helpful with my husband while I worked out of state. When I told them the whole story, including the pregnancy, including the money, they sat there in shock. Her mother started crying. Her father turned this strange shade of red I had never seen on him. He called her in front of me, put the phone on speaker, and asked her straight out what was going on. She went immediately into denial mode, saying I was jealous, that I was making things up because I could not handle how close they had become while I was gone. When he kept pressing, she finally admitted that something was happening but tried to pin it all on my husband, saying he had seduced her, that she was only trying to comfort him, that it was not her fault if they fell in love. Her parents gave her an ultimatum right there on speaker. Come home and sort out her life, or stay with him and lose their financial support for school. She chose him. Of course she did. Her mother hung up on her, sobbing. Her father apologized to me over and over, even though it was not his betrayal, and said they would no longer be paying any of her bills. I thanked them and told them honestly that I did not want anything from them. I just wanted to be done. I wish that had been the end of their attempts to pull me back in. It was not. One afternoon, I looked out my parents' front window and saw my husband standing on the sidewalk, leaning on his portable oxygen, looking thinner than ever. My heart did that awful twist it always does when I see him in that state, even after everything. My father moved to shut the curtains. I stopped him, because I knew if we hid, it would turn into some dramatic story later about how cruel I was. My husband rang the bell. My father opened the door but did not move aside. I could hear them from the hallway. I need to talk to her, my husband said, voice hoarse. She does not want to talk to you, my father replied. He started pleading, his voice rising. He took a step forward like he was going to push his way in. You cannot keep her from me, he said. She is my wife. She cannot just walk away. People need to know what she did. She left me when I am sick. I will go to her old job and tell them she abandoned a sick man. I will post everything online. I will make sure everyone knows what kind of person she really is. I felt something icy settle in my chest. There it was. The threats, the public shaming. The plan was to make me look like the villain so I would cave and keep paying. Classic. I stepped into the hallway where he could see me over my father's shoulder. You want to talk to me? Talk, I said. He looked past my father, eyes shiny. Kendra, he said, like my name was supposed to undo everything. Please, you cannot do this. I will die without that health plan. I will die without those meds. How can you live with that on your conscience? You already died as my husband, I said. And yes, I know that was dramatic, but I was angry and exhausted. You killed whatever this marriage was when you climbed into bed with my friend and started planning a family with her. Do not put that on me. He shook his head, breathing faster. It was not that simple, he said. I was scared. You were gone. She was here. One thing led to another, and now she is pregnant, and I do not know what to do. But the one thing that could help is if you keep me on your plan for a little while longer, just until I figure things out. 30 days. 60 days. Something. Please. I almost laughed at the wording. Figure things out. Like this was a scheduling problem and not his entire moral compass spinning out. When I ended the contract, I said, the plan ended too. There is no magic card you get to keep. I do not have that job anymore. I am looking for a new one here. You are asking me to do something that is not even possible. He blinked, thrown. Clearly, he had not thought that far. We can find another plan then, he said. You are good at this stuff. You can figure it out. You always do. That was the moment I realized that to him, I was less a partner and more a resource. A problem solver. A walking health insurance strategy. No, I said. I am done figuring things out for you. Talk to your parents? Talk to your new girlfriend? Talk to a social worker? I am done. I closed the door. He pounded on it for a while, shouted some more about how cruel I was, how everyone would judge me. My father stood there the whole time, arms crossed, refusing to engage. Eventually, the pounding stopped. When we peeked through the curtain, he was gone. If this were the part of the story where everything wrapped up neatly, I would tell you that filing for divorce solved everything. It did not. It did start the actual legal process, though. The lawyer filed the papers, which meant my husband got served and had to respond. He could have fought it, could have tried to drag it out, but he did not. Maybe he thought he could still manipulate me outside the court system. A few days after the papers went in, my in-laws came back, this time with a guy from their church in tow. He was one of those people who speaks in gentle tones while saying the most guilt-heavy things you have ever heard. They sat in my parents' living room like it was some kind of intervention. He talked about forgiveness. He talked about sacrifice. He talked about how real love endures hardship and betrayal and sickness. He quoted verses about staying with your spouse through trials. He suggested that my decision to divorce my husband in his time of need would weigh heavily on my soul. I listened for a while. Then I snapped. "Let me make this really clear," I said. If he had just been sick and scared and difficult, I would still be there. If he had been honest about how overwhelmed he felt, I would have stayed. I married him for all of that. What I did not sign up for was sending my paycheck to cover his bills while he slept with my best friend in my bed and planned a baby with her. That is not a trial. That is betrayal. And if you think my duty as a wife includes funding that, then your idea of marriage and mine are not even in the same universe. The church guy opened his mouth to launch into a rebuttal. I held up a hand. "Do not," I said. "Do not tell me what God wants from me right now. God can talk to me directly if that is the priority. Until then, the only people deciding what I do with my life are me and the lawyer I hired." My in-laws left looking wounded and offended. The church guy offered to pray with me. I told him he could pray at home. I am sure I am on some gossip list now as the woman who left her sick husband, but you know what? Let them talk. The strangest part of the whole legal mess was how fast he signed the agreement. The lawyer called one morning and said, "He has agreed to your terms." No contest over the small savings I had. No argument over splitting debts. He basically just signed away any claim he could have fought for. He might be afraid of what would come out in a hearing, the lawyer said. People get nervous about having their spending examined in public, especially when there has been cheating. I thought about those baby store charges, the restaurant bills, the mysterious subscriptions, and nodded. Fine by me. The less time I had to spend in a courthouse, the better. I found a new nursing job in a local clinic. Nothing glamorous, but steady. I moved into a small apartment not far from my parents, because starting over is easier when someone can bring you dinner without asking too many questions. I had redirected all my mail there and updated every medical office and creditor with the new address. I changed my number. I blocked him on every possible way he could contact me. I blocked her too. I asked mutual friends not to give out my information. For a while, it was quiet. Then the universe remembered that it hates clean endings. One afternoon, I got a message from a woman I vaguely knew from school, someone who had always hovered around the edge of our friend group. She said my former best friend had asked her to reach out to me because she was too ashamed to contact me directly. She said they were struggling, that they had no money, that his health was worse, that the pregnancy was complicated, that they needed help. She framed it like some kind of emergency charity case. I stared at the message for a solid minute, feeling my jaw clench. Then I blocked her. I did not answer. I know that sounds cold, but you have to understand. At that point, my empathy tank for those two people was beyond empty. They had made their choices. They had chosen each other over me and over honesty. They had treated me like a wallet with legs. Whatever they were dealing with now was the bill coming due. A few days later, a letter came in the mail. It was one of those hospital envelopes that makes your stomach drop when you see it. I opened it with shaking hands and found a notice about an old bill that was still partly in my name. For a second, I thought my worst fear was coming true, that I was going to be stuck paying for their mess forever. I called the lawyer in a panic. He explained calmly that it was an older charge from before the filing and that we would sort it out according to the agreement. He reminded me that the divorce papers clearly laid out responsibility for future medical debts. His voice soothed me a little, but that letter still set off a wave of anxiety that lasted days. It was like the past had claws and kept trying to drag me back. Not long after that, he called again with news that would have made me laugh if the whole thing were not so sad. My ex had filed something related to paternity. My former best friend had given birth, and there was a question about whether he was actually the father. He had been telling people it was his, acting like a father, until one of his doctors made a comment about fertility and the math stopped feeling so certain. Given the medications he was on and what some of his doctors had said about fertility, he had started to suspect something. He had asked for a test. The results were clear. The baby was not his. I sat there with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the lawyer describe how my ex had reacted. Anger, denial, shock, eventually some kind of quiet acceptance. The woman who had torn my life apart with him had been sleeping with someone else at the same time, and when the music stopped, She was the one left holding a baby with no willing father. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her. That part was very small. Mostly, I felt this cold, grim satisfaction. It was not that I wished ill on the baby. The baby was just collateral damage in adults' terrible choices, which happens more often than it should. But I could not help thinking, you built this. You both did. You thought you were getting some grand love story out of my pain, and instead you got a cautionary tale. People tell me bits and pieces about my ex's life now, even though I do not ask. Apparently his parents had to sell their house to keep paying for his treatments. They live in a small apartment now. They lost our old place when the lease came up, and neither of them could cover it. They are still very involved in his care, which is honestly what they always wanted anyway, to be the center of his universe. My former best friend works a string of low-paying jobs, trying to juggle childcare and her own exhaustion. The guy who turned out to be the actual father of the baby has vanished, not interested in diapers or court orders. Apparently, it was someone she had been seeing casually before everything imploded, and he wanted nothing to do with fatherhood once reality hit. Somewhere in the middle of all this, my ex wrote a letter and had it filed with the court as part of the final paperwork, because he knew that was the only way it would have to pass through my lawyer and maybe land in front of me. I did not have to read it. I did. Of course I did. I am human. He apologized in his own way. He said he had been scared, that he had felt abandoned when I went to work out of state, even though he understood why I did it. He said he had fallen into something with her that he did not know how to stop. He admitted that he had used my sense of responsibility, that he had assumed I would always be there, always pay, always fix things. He said he regretted hurting me. Then he asked in this roundabout, pathetic way if I could help him one last time with some of his bills, because he had no one else to turn to. I folded the letter and threw it in the trash. That might sound cruel to you. Maybe from the outside it looks like I kicked a sick man while he was down. What I knew, standing in my small kitchen with that paper in my hands, was that if I opened that door even a crack, he would wedge himself back in. He would find ways to make my life about his needs again. I could not survive another round of that. The waiting period passed. The divorce became official. The lawyer sent me a final packet with a stamp on it that might as well have said, "You are free now." My parents bought a cheap bottle of bubbly drink and we toasted in their living room. It was not some grand party, but it felt like breathing real air for the first time in years. In the months since, I have built something that almost looks like a life. I go to work. I come home to my quiet apartment. I cook simple meals. I go for walks. I see my parents regularly. I have made a couple of new friends at the clinic who know pieces of the story but not all of it. I am not ready to date. Maybe I will be someday. Maybe not. I am not in a rush. Sometimes late at night I think about him. I wonder if he is in a hospital bed somewhere counting ceiling tiles. If he is sitting in a chair by a window thinking about the way we used to lie on our old couch and talk about where we would travel someday. I wonder if he ever truly understands that the worst thing he did to me was not the cheating itself, awful as that was, but the way he turned my love into a financial trap, the way he assumed I would keep funding his new life because he was sick and I was kind. People have told me I am strong. I do not feel strong. I feel like someone who got pushed past her breaking point and then had to figure out how to stand up again because there was no other option. I used to think being a good person meant always saying yes, always being available, always sacrificing. Now I think maybe being a decent human sometimes means looking at a situation and saying, actually, no, I am not going to light myself on fire to keep you warm. There is no neat moral here, no perfect justice. He is still sick. That part is not going away. He is living with whatever choices he made, and so is she. I am living with mine. My life is quieter now. Smaller in some ways, but it is mine. My money pays my bills. My bed is my own. My health plan only has my name on it. If you were here on my couch right now, with a mug of something hot in your hands while I tried not to spill my whole life in your lap, I would probably end this the same way I started it, with something like, "You are not going to believe what I let happen to me and what I finally walked away from." I would tell you that love is not supposed to feel like constantly checking your bank app while ignoring the knot in your stomach. I would tell you that you can care about someone deeply and still choose yourself when they show you exactly how little they value you. And then I would probably make some dark joke about how, if anyone ever asks you to move out of state to get them better health coverage while their best friend volunteers to help out with the meds, you should at least install cameras in your bedroom. I am kidding. Mostly. There is one thing I have not admitted yet, and since we are already knee-deep in my business, I might as well say it. There was a night, a few weeks after the divorce papers were finalized, when I almost called him. Not because I wanted him back. Not because I suddenly forgave everything. but because loneliness is a sneaky liar and pain has a way of rewriting history at 2 in the morning. I had just finished a long shift at the clinic. It had been one of those days where every patient seemed to have 10 problems at once and nobody wanted to listen and the printer jammed every 5 minutes. I came home, kicked off my shoes, dropped my bag on the chair, and stood in the dark kitchen staring at the fridge like it held some kind of answer. There were leftovers and a half-empty bottle of cheap wine and nothing else. My phone was on the counter, screen face down. I poured myself a glass of wine, microwaved some food, and sat on the couch with the television on low just for noise. Some random show was playing, couples arguing, dramatic music, you know the type. At some point, the episode showed a scene where the wife sat in a hospital room watching her husband sleep, and something in my chest cracked open. All the nights I had sat beside his bed came rushing back. The worry, the way I would count his breaths, the way I would adjust his blanket even when he did not need it. I picked up my phone without thinking and scrolled through my contacts until I hit his name. My thumb hovered over it. For a second, my brain tried to tell me a story. Maybe I could call and say I was just checking on his health. Maybe I could be the bigger person. Maybe we could at least be civil. Maybe walking away did not have to mean erasing him completely. Then another part of my brain spoke up. The part that had walked into that bedroom and seen my best friend in my place. The part that had read his letter asking me for money again wrapped in an apology. That part of me remembered every time he had used his illness like a shield, hiding behind it whenever anyone tried to hold him accountable. That part remembered how small I had felt in my own life. I locked my phone, set it on the table, and sat on my hands so I would not grab it again. I let myself cry for a while. Ugly tears. The kind that make your face puff up and your nose run. Then I went to bed alone in my small apartment and reminded myself out loud that missing the good parts of someone does not mean you owe them access to you after they have destroyed the rest. That is something people do not talk about enough. When you leave someone after a betrayal, especially a messy, complicated one, everyone expects you to be either completely over it or totally wrecked. They do not understand the middle ground where you are functioning, working, laughing at things, and still, randomly, get hit by a memory that knocks the breath out of you. You are allowed to miss the version of him that existed before all of this without wanting him back. You are allowed to miss the life you thought you were building without wanting to rebuild it with the same person. I started therapy around that time, mostly because my mother gently shoved the idea at me until I stopped dodging it. I found a counselor in town who specialized in grief and relationships, and in the first session, I spent 40 minutes talking about his lungs and his cheating and the money, and about 5 minutes talking about me. She stopped me at one point and said very plainly, "You talk about him like he is the main character and you are a supporting role in his movie." I sat there blinking at her because I had never thought about it that way. But she was right. Even in my own head, I had turned myself into the background nurse in his drama, the one who shows up with meds and paperwork and maybe some emotional support, but not the one whose interior life matters. She had me do this stupid exercise where I had to describe my life without using his name or the word wife. At first it felt silly, then it felt impossibly hard. So much of how I had defined myself for years was wrapped up in being his person, in being the one who handled everything. It was like trying to peel a sticker off a glass bottle without ripping it. Eventually, you just realize the sticker is not coming off clean, and you will have to live with some leftover pieces. We worked on boundaries. We worked on guilt, especially the heavy, sticky guilt about leaving a sick man. She reminded me, again and again, that he is a grown man who made conscious choices. His illness explained some of his fear, sure, but it did not excuse betrayal or exploitation. I hated hearing that at first because I had built my whole coping mechanism around the idea that if I could understand his reasons, maybe I could soften the hurt. She made me sit with the idea that some things are just wrong, even if you know why someone did them. The clinic became this weird little anchor in my week. We saw everything from kids with scraped knees to older folks managing blood pressure and diabetes. I listened to people complain about medications, about insurance, about family members who did not help enough. Sometimes I wanted to shake them and say, "You have no idea how lucky you are that your biggest problem is convincing your uncle to take his pills." Instead, I nodded and offered practical advice, because that is what my job requires. One day, a woman around my age came in with her partner, who had some chronic condition that needed monitoring. She handled all his paperwork, spoke for him when he hesitated, double-checked every detail of his prescriptions. He sat there looking embarrassed but grateful. I watched them interact and felt this strange mix of nostalgia and warning bells. After the appointment, while we were finishing the chart, she made a joke about how she felt like his personal nurse and accountant rolled into one. "Be careful with that," I said before I could stop myself. She looked at me, curious. Why? She asked. Because if you are not careful, one day you wake up and realize you have been running someone else's life so hard that you lost track of your own, I said. Then I softened it with a little laugh and added, not that I am projecting or anything. She laughed too because she thought I was joking. I smiled because that was easier than telling her the whole story. It hit me later, driving home, that this was going to be a thing now. I would see versions of my old life everywhere. I would see women bending themselves into pretzels to carry everyone else and call it love. I would see men leaning into that care because it is easier than standing up on their own. And I would wonder how many of them were one bad decision away from lighting the whole thing on fire. My former best friend pops into my head sometimes, which annoys me because I resent giving her any more mental space. I think about the times we sat on my parents' porch in high school, planning our futures, talking about careers and apartments, and maybe living in the same city forever. If you had told teenage us that someday she would be the other woman in my marriage, she would have laughed in your face. She used to swear she would never be that girl, the one who went after someone else's partner. Life has a dark sense of humor. From what I hear, she is not doing great. Her relationship with my ex imploded when the paternity test results came back. His parents blame her for everything now, which is unfair in its own lopsided way, because their son was there the whole time making his own choices. Her parents are still holding their ground about money, so she works, and she raises her baby, and she posts vague, sad quotes online about betrayal and starting over, according to the one mutual friend I have not blocked yet. There is a temptation people have when they hear a story like mine to turn it into a neat morality tale. He cheated, he got sick, he got left, he suffered. She betrayed her friend, she got pregnant by someone who did not stick around, she is struggling. I walked away, I went to therapy, I am rebuilding. It is very tidy if you squint, but the truth is much messier. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night sweating because I dreamed he was in the hospital and I could not get there in time. Sometimes I hear a cough in a crowded place and my body tenses before my brain even catches up. Sometimes I hear a song we used to dance to in our living room, and I have to leave whatever store I am in because my eyes fill with tears. Trauma does not care that the plot hit its beats. It just lives in your nervous system, popping up like a bad ad when you least expect it. I also feel relief in ways that surprise me. Relief that I do not have to check my bank account 10 times a day. Relief that I do not have to justify every purchase against some invisible medical emergency. Relief that if I come home exhausted and eat cereal for dinner on the couch, nobody is watching me with disappointed eyes or asking for more than I have to give. There is guilt tangled up in that relief, because he is still sick, and I am not made of stone, but the relief is real. Someone asked me recently if I would ever date someone with a chronic illness again. Weird question, but I get why they asked. My answer changes depending on the day. Sometimes I say never, because I am too tired. Sometimes I say maybe, because I know not everyone would weaponize their condition the way he did. The problem was never his lungs. The problem was his choices. What messed with my head the most was realizing how normal it had started. Little helpful choices that slowly turned into me carrying everything. I keep thinking about that, because I do not ever want to miss those signs again. And if you ever find yourself sending half your paycheck to a partner who makes you feel guilty for not sending more, while a third party moves into your home under the label of helper, maybe ask a few more questions. Maybe do not ignore those little twinges in your gut. Maybe listen to the part of you that is uneasy instead of drowning it in explanations about how everyone is just stressed. I do not know how my story ends. I am in the middle of it. Maybe in a few years I will look back at this version of myself and think I was still too soft, or too hard, or too stuck. Maybe I will be in a different city, with a different job, maybe in a relationship with someone who actually knows how to show up without asking for my last piece of sanity. Maybe I will still be single and weirdly content, adopting a dog and talking to my plants. I have no idea. What I do know is that the chapter with him is closed. Not because a judge stamped some papers, but because I finally chose to step out of the role I had been playing for so long. I stopped being his wife, his nurse, his financial plan. I started being just me, Kendra. A woman who has made more than a few questionable choices, but finally drew a line in thick, permanent ink. If you were sitting here right now and told me a story that sounded even a little like mine, I would probably grab your hand and say, listen, I am not going to tell you what to do, but I am going to remind you that you are allowed to leave. You are allowed to protect yourself. You are allowed to stop paying for other people's messes, emotionally and financially. It does not make you cruel. It makes you alive. So that is it. That is the whole ugly, complicated, surprisingly freeing story. I loved a man whose lungs betrayed him. I left my home to save him. He slept with my best friend in the bed I picked out. They both expected me to keep paying for everything. I said no. He is still sick. She is still dealing with the fallout. I am still here, still breathing, still learning how to be the main character in my own life. And no matter what anyone says about me behind closed doors, that is the part I am choosing to live with. And if after hearing all of this you still feel a tiny bit of sympathy for him, I get it. I really do. I loved him once too. But I am finally learning that I can hold that old love in one hand and hold my own damn boundaries in the other without dropping either. I can remember the boy who made me laugh and also never forget the man who stood by while I was turned into a walking wallet. Both things are true. Both versions existed. I am just done pretending the first one cancels out the second. Most days now, when I lock my door at night and turn out the lights, there is this small, quiet feeling in my chest that I did not have before. It is not happiness exactly, not yet, but it is something close to peace. My life is simple and boring in the best possible way. My biggest problems are work schedules and laundry and whether I remembered to defrost something for dinner. After everything that happened, that kind of boring feels like a luxury. And nobody, absolutely nobody, is ever going to make me feel guilty for wanting that again.